Park Ji-soo had worked the night shift at the Korean Space Defense Center for 3 years. She was used to quiet nights. She was used to staring at screens that showed nothing but stars and the slow movement of satellites. She was used to drinking cold coffee and counting the hours until sunrise. But this night was different. It started with a flicker. A small dot appeared at the edge of her screen, far beyond the orbit of Mars. Ji-soo leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. She thought it was a glitch. The old computers sometimes showed phantom signals. She ran a diagnostic check and waited. The dot did not disappear. Instead, it multiplied. 1 became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became 1,000. Ji-soo felt her heart begin to race. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, running calculations she had learned in training but never expected to use. The objects were moving fast. Very fast. They were not asteroids. Asteroids did not move in formation. Asteroids did not change direction. These things were changing direction. They were adjusting their course. They were heading straight for Earth. She picked up the phone with trembling hands and called her. Supervisor. Colonel Kim Do-eun arrived 12 minutes later. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the military for 30 years. He had seen many strange things. But when he looked at Ji-soo's screen, his face went pale. "How many?" he asked. His voice was calm, but Ji-soo could hear the fear underneath. 9,500 objects, she said. Each one is approximately 3 kilometers long. They are maintaining a tight formation. They will reach Earth orbit in 7 days. Do-eun stood very still. He did not speak for a long time. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over Seoul. Birds were singing. Cars were starting to fill the streets. People were waking up, making breakfast, sending their children to school. They had no idea that everything was about to change. "Send the alert," Do-eun finally said. "All channels. Every nation. Every military base. Every government." Ji-soo nodded and began typing. Her hands were shaking so badly that she made several mistakes. She had to delete and start again. But finally, the message was sent. It flew across the world at the speed of light. It reached Washington and Beijing and Moscow and London. It reached small military outposts in the desert and submarines deep under the ocean. The message was simple. Unknown fleet approaching Earth. Estimated 9,500 vessels. Arrival in 7 days. This is not a drill. Within hours, the world knew. The reaction was chaos. Stock markets crashed. People flooded the streets in panic. Some ran to churches and temples to pray. Others broke into stores and took everything they could carry. Governments tried to maintain order, but fear was spreading faster than any virus. In the Valoran flagship, High Commander Torek watched the blue planet grow larger on his view screen. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His skin was dark purple, and his eyes glowed with a soft yellow light. He had commanded fleets for 200 years. He had conquered 11 star systems. He had never lost a battle. Earth would be easy. His scouts had studied these humans for many cycles. They were primitive. They had only recently discovered how to leave their own planet. Their weapons were crude. Their ships were slow. They spent most of their time fighting each other over small pieces of land. Torek almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Status report," he said to his second-in-command. A female Valoran named Kira. "All ships are in formation," Kira replied. "We will enter the target system within the scheduled time. Local resistance is expected to be minimal." "Minimal," Torek repeated with a smile. "I like that word." He looked at the small blue dot on his screen. Such a pretty little world. It would make a fine addition to the Empire. The humans would be put to work in the mines, of course. They were too weak for combat, but they could dig. They could carry. They could serve. Send a message to the Emperor, Torek said. Tell him that Earth will fall within 3 rotations of our arrival. Tell him to prepare the colonization fleet. Back on Earth, the panic was beginning to settle into something else. Something harder. Something more determined. In a bunker beneath Seoul, Colonel Dohan gathered his staff. There were 20 officers in the room, men and women from different branches of the military. They looked scared. They looked tired. But they were listening. We have 7 days, Dohan said. 7 days to prepare for the largest invasion in human history. Our combined space fleet numbers 47 ships. Most of them are research vessels with weapons attached as an afterthought. We have no experience fighting in space. We have no idea what kind of technology these aliens possess. He paused and looked at each face in the room. But we are not going to surrender. We are not going to hide. We are going to fight. And we are going to make them pay for every inch of our planet. A young lieutenant raised her hand. Her name was Beek Minji, and she had been in the military for only 2 years. Sir, how can we fight against 9,000 ships? It seems impossible. Dohan smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had accepted death and decided to meet it standing up. Lieutenant, humans have been doing impossible things since we first climbed down from the trees. We split the atom. We walked on the moon. We connected every person on this planet through invisible signals in the air. We are very good at impossible things. He turned to Jizu, who was standing in the corner, still looking at her tablet. Officer Park, I want you to coordinate with every space agency in the world. Share all data. No secrets. No politics. We are one planet now. Jizu nodded. Yes, sir. Dohan looked at the map of the world on the wall. So many countries. So many borders. So many old grudges and ancient hatreds. He wondered if humanity could truly come together. He wondered if 7 days was enough time to save the world. But then he remembered something his grandmother had told him when he was a boy. She had survived the war. She had survived poverty and hunger and loss. And she had told him that humans were like weeds. You could burn them, poison them, tear them out by the roots. But they always came back. They always found a way to survive. To Rek and his Valoran Empire had no idea what was coming. They saw a small planet full of weak, divided creatures. They saw an easy victory. They did not see the fire that was beginning to burn in human hearts. They did not see the old enemies reaching across borders to shake hands. They did not see the scientists and soldiers and ordinary people who were already working through the night, refusing to sleep, refusing to give up. They did not know that humanity was about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. 7 days. 9,500 ships. One small blue planet. The countdown had begun. The world changed in those first 48 hours. Old enemies stopped fighting. Countries that had been at war for decades suddenly found reasons to talk. Borders opened. Secrets were shared. For the first time in human history, Earth spoke with one voice. In Geneva, Switzerland, the United Nations held an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation sat together in one room. Some of them had never met before. Some of them had spent their entire careers working against each other. But now they had no choice. They had to work together or die together. The debates were long and loud. Some leaders wanted to surrender. They said that fighting was hopeless. Better to accept defeat and hope for mercy from the invaders. Others wanted to run. They talked about building underground shelters, hiding until the danger passed. But a small group had a different idea. General Lee Sunho had been retired for 5 years. He was 72 years old, and he spent most of his time gardening at his small house in Bizen. He had served in the military for 40 years. He had fought in wars. He had studied strategy his entire life. And now, his government had asked him to come out of retirement one last time. He sat in a small conference room with two other people. One was Yoon Hana, a physicist who had spent 20 years studying gravity and space. The other was Choi Tai-woo, a former Special Forces commander who now taught history at a university. They were an unusual team. A retired general, a scientist, and a teacher. But together, they were about to create a plan that would change everything. They expect us to fight like everyone else, Sun-ho said. He spread papers across the table. They were reports from scientists who had studied the alien signals. They were drawings of alien ships. They were calculations about speed and weapons and shields. Every species they have conquered fought in the same way. They lined up their ships. They had big battles in space. They lost, Hana nodded. She was a small woman with short hair and sharp eyes. I have analyzed their approach. They are coming in a standard formation. They spread out to surround the target. They overwhelm with numbers. It is very effective against traditional enemies. But we are not traditional, Tai-woo said. He was a big man with a beard and gentle eyes. He had killed many people in his younger days. Now he taught children about the mistakes of the past. We are humans. We do not fight fair. We never have. Sun-ho smiled. Exactly. We need to surprise them. We need to fight in ways they have never seen before. For the next 6 days, humanity worked harder than it had ever worked before. In Chile, miners pulled ancient nuclear weapons from deep underground storage. These bombs had been built during the Cold War, meant to destroy cities. Now they would be used to destroy alien ships. Workers loaded them onto rockets that had been designed for peaceful space exploration. The rockets were not powerful enough to reach the aliens in deep space. But they would work just fine once the enemy came closer. In Germany, engineers worked around the clock to modify satellites. These machines had been built to send television signals and study weather patterns. Now they were given new purposes. Some became weapons. Others became sensors. Others became decoys, designed to confuse and distract. In Japan, fishermen and boat captains volunteered their knowledge of the oceans. They knew the currents and the depths. They knew where to hide submarines and where to place underwater weapons. The seas of Earth would become a trap. In Korea, computer programmers wrote new code. They created viruses and hacking tools. They did not know if human computers could communicate with alien machines. But they would try. Every advantage mattered. And deep in Antarctica, in a secret base built into the ice, Hana and her team worked on something special. For 20 years, Hana had studied gravitational anomalies. She had discovered that space itself could be bent and twisted. She had written papers about it. She had given lectures. But no one had believed her theories could be turned into weapons. Now she had funding. She had resources. She had the best scientists from every country working beside her. If this works, she explained to Sun-ho over a video call, it will create a gravitational pulse. Space itself will fold and tear around the target zone. Anything caught inside will be ripped apart at the molecular level. Sun-ho listened carefully. And if it does not work? Hana paused. She looked at the massive machine behind her. It filled a cavern carved from ancient ice. Thousands of cables connected to computers and generators. Scientists in heavy coats moved around it like ants. If it does not work, she said quietly, the energy feedback will destroy everything within 300 kilometers, including us. Are you willing to take that risk? Hana thought about her daughter. She was 8 years old, with her father's smile and her mother's curiosity. She had been sent to a shelter in Switzerland. Safe, hidden, waiting. Yes, Hana said. I am willing. Meanwhile, Captain An Yuri took command of Earth's space fleet. It was not much of a fleet. 47 ships, most of them small. The largest was a research vessel called the Sunrise. It had been designed to study asteroids, not fight wars. But Yuri did not complain. She was 35 years old, and she had dreamed of space since she was a child. She had trained for years to be an astronaut. She had fixed satellites and conducted experiments in orbit. She had never expected to lead humanity's last defense, but here she was. Listen carefully, she told her crews over the radio. We cannot beat them in a straight fight. We are too few, and they are too many. So we will not fight straight. We will hide. We will strike from shadows. We will make them afraid of every asteroid and every piece of debris. We will make space itself their enemy. Her crews listened. They were scared. They knew they would probably die. But they did not run. They stayed at their posts. They checked their weapons. They waited on the ground. Sergeant Beek Minji organized civilian volunteers. She taught them how to hide, how to fight, how to survive. She set up communication networks that did not rely on satellites. She prepared for the worst. If they land, she told her people, we fight in the cities. We fight in the forests. We fight in the mountains. We never stop. We never surrender. We make them pay for every step. Old women learn to carry messages. Children learn to spot enemy aircraft. Farmers learned to hide food and weapons. Every person became a soldier. Day 6 arrived. The alien fleet was now visible to telescopes. Thousands of ships, each one larger than any building on Earth. They blocked out the stars as they approached Dot in the Valoran flagship. High Commander Torek received reports from his scouts. The humans are moving ships into orbit, Kira told him. 47 vessels detected. All small, all slow. They are no threat. Torek laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound. 47 ships against 9,000. They are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both, Kira said. Prepare the first wave. Torek ordered. 500 ships. We will descend into their atmosphere and show them the power of the Empire. After they see their cities burn, they will beg to surrender. He did not know about the nuclear weapons waiting in the darkness of space. He did not know about the underwater drones hidden in the Pacific Ocean. He did not know about the BIAS gravitational weapon being tested in Antarctica. He did not know that humanity was not preparing to surrender. Humanity was preparing the biggest trap in history. The seventh day dawned on Earth. It was a beautiful morning. The sun rose over mountains and oceans and cities. Birds sang. Flowers opened. Children woke up and wondered if this would be their last day. In bunkers and basements, in submarines and spacecraft, humans waited. They held their weapons. They said prayers. They thought of the people they loved. The enemy had arrived. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The Valoran fleet entered Earth orbit at dawn. 9,500 ships spread across the sky like a dark blanket, blocking the sun over half the planet. People on the ground looked up and saw metal mountains floating above them. Some screamed. Some prayed. Some just stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. High Commander Torek stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. Below him, the blue planet waited. It was beautiful, he had to admit. Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds. It would make a fine addition to the Empire. His soldiers would walk on those beaches. His factories would cover those forests. His name would be remembered forever as the one who brought Earth into the fold. Status report, he said. Kira checked her screens. All ships in position. No resistance detected. The human fleet has retreated behind their moon. Torek frowned slightly. Retreated? They are not even trying to fight. It appears they are hiding, Commander. Cowards, Torek said. But something felt wrong. In his 200 years of conquest, he had never seen a species simply run away. Most fought. Most died with honor. These humans were behaving strangely, but it did not matter. Whether they fought or hid, the result would be the same. Send the first wave, Torek ordered. 500 ships. Begin atmospheric entry over the largest ocean. We will establish a beach point and begin landing ground forces. The first wave separated from the main fleet. 500 warships, each one capable of destroying a small city. They began their descent toward Earth, their hulls glowing red as they entered the atmosphere. On the ocean below, the Pacific was calm. Sunlight sparkled on gentle waves. It looked peaceful. It looked empty. It was not empty. Captain An Yuri watched from her hidden position behind the moon. Her small fleet was dark and silent, pretending to be debris. On her screen, she could see the 500 enemy ships entering the atmosphere. Wait for it, she whispered to herself. Wait for it. Deep beneath the Pacific, 10,000 underwater drones waited. They had been placed there over the past week by submarines from 12 different nations. Each drone was small, about the size of a car. Each one carried a simple explosive charge. They were not powerful enough to destroy an alien warship. But that was not their purpose. Colonel Doan sat in his bunker beneath Seoul, watching the same screens. Beside him stood General Sunho, his old hands steady despite his racing heart. Now, Sunho said. Duhan gave the order. The Pacific Ocean exploded. 10,000 drones rose from the depths at once. They broke through the surface and shot into the sky, creating walls of water and fire. They did not fly toward the enemy ships. Instead, they exploded at different heights, filling the air with debris and heat and electromagnetic interference. The Valoran sensors went blind. Their screens filled with static. Their targeting systems could not find their targets. Pilots screamed for information, but there was only chaos. In that moment of confusion, the real attack began. From islands scattered across the Pacific, missiles launched. These were not ordinary missiles. These were the nuclear weapons that humanity had built to destroy itself. Now they flew toward a different enemy. The Valorans had shields. Powerful shields that could stop energy weapons and particle beams and plasma fire. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans could match. But their shields had never faced nuclear fire. The first missile struck a Valoran cruiser on its underside. The nuclear warhead detonated. For a brief moment, a small sun was born in Earth's atmosphere. The heat was beyond imagination. The force was beyond measurement. The Valoran shields flickered and failed. The cruiser's hull melted like butter in a furnace. The ship fell from the sky in pieces, crashing into the ocean with a thunder that could be heard 100 kilometers away. High Commander Torek stared at his screen in shock. One of his ships was simply gone, destroyed by a primitive weapon that his species had stopped using 10,000 years ago. What was that? He demanded. What kind of weapon? Kira's face was pale. It appears to be an atomic device, Commander. Fission-based, very crude. Very old, but effective. More missiles were rising from the ocean and the islands. The Valoran ships tried to shoot them down, but the debris and interference made it difficult to aim. Explosion after explosion lit up the sky. Ships fell like rain. Pull back, Torek shouted. All ships, pull back. But it was too late for some. 47 Valoran ships died in the first hour of battle. 47 vessels destroyed by weapons that the Empire had dismissed as ancient history. In her bunker in Jeju Island, Captain Yuri allowed herself a small smile. It was working. The plan was actually working. But she knew this was only the beginning. They had surprised the enemy once. They would not be surprised again. The surviving Valoran ships retreated to high orbit. Torek paced his bridge, his yellow eyes burning with anger. He had lost 47 ships to a species that should not have been able to scratch his paint. "Analyze those weapons," he ordered. "Find their weakness." "Commander," Kira said carefully, "these atomic weapons are dangerous, but limited. They require physical delivery. They are slow. And the humans have a limited supply. They cannot have many left." Torek nodded slowly. She was right. This was a trick, a desperate gamble. The humans had thrown their best punch and killed only 47 ships. He still had 9,453 vessels. The numbers were still overwhelming. "Reorganize the fleet," he said. "We will not enter the atmosphere again. Instead, we will bombard from orbit. We will burn their cities until they beg for mercy." The bombardment began at noon. Valoran ships fired plasma cannons from the safety of space. The beams fell like deadly rain, striking cities across the globe. Buildings exploded. Streets melted. Millions of people died in the first hour. Seoul was hit. New York was hit. London and Tokyo and Mumbai and Cairo. Ancient monuments turned to dust. Modern towers collapsed like toys. In their bunkers and shelters, humans screamed and cried and held each other. They had won a small victory, and now they were paying the price. Colonel Dohon watched the reports with tears in his eyes. His city was burning. His home was gone. His neighbors were dead. He wanted to surrender, to make it stop, to end the suffering. But he remembered what Sunho had said. "The bombardment will come. We knew this. We planned for this. Our people are underground. Our weapons are hidden. Let them burn the surface. We will strike back when they least expect it." It was a terrible plan. It required sacrifice beyond imagination. But it was the only plan they had thought in Antarctica. Yunhana worked without sleep. The gravitational weapon was almost ready. Just a few more days of adjustment. Just a few more tests. If she could hold on, if the world could hold on, they might still have a chance. Her assistant, a young man named Seo Junho, brought her coffee and data reports. He was only 25 years old, too young to die in an ice cave at the end of the world. But he never complained. He never asked to leave. "The power readings are stable," he said. "We can attempt a small test tomorrow." Hannah nodded. "Good. Tomorrow we test. And then we wait for the right moment." She looked out the small window of the facility. The Antarctic sky was clear and cold. Somewhere above, thousands of alien ships were burning her world. Her daughter was hidden in a mountain. Her husband was organizing resistance in what remained of BUSAN. She would save them all. Or she would die trying. On the Valoran flagship, Tarek watched the planet burn and felt satisfied. The humans were suffering. Soon they would break. Soon they would send their pathetic surrender, and he would accept it with gracious contempt. He did not know about the weapon in Antarctica. He did not know about the submarines moving silently through dark waters, carrying more missiles. He did not know that humanity was not breaking. Humanity was waiting. And when the time came, humanity would strike with a fury the galaxy had never seen. The bombardment lasted for 3 days. 3 days of fire falling from the sky. 3 days of cities burning and people dying. 3 days of darkness and despair. But humanity did not break. In the ruins of Daegu, Sergeant Beek Minji led a group of survivors through collapsed subway tunnels. There were 43 people in her group. Old men, young women, children, too scared to cry. They moved slowly, carefully, avoiding the places where alien sensors might detect them. "Keep moving," Minji whispered. "One step at a time. We are almost at the shelter. A little boy, no more than 6 years old, held her hand. His name was Yemen, and he had lost his parents in the first bombing. He had not spoken since then. He just followed Minji wherever she went, holding her hand and staring at nothing. Minji felt anger burning in her chest. These aliens had come from across the stars to hurt this child. They had destroyed his home. They had killed his family. They had taken everything from him. She would make them pay. She did not know how, but she would find a way. Above them, the Valoran ships continued their work. They had burned most of the major cities. They had destroyed highways and bridges and power plants. They believed they were winning, but they did not understand humans. Across the world, resistance networks were forming. People who had never met were learning to work together. Messages traveled through old radio frequencies and messenger pigeons and runners who moved through forests and mountains. Technology had failed, but human determination had not died in what remained of London. An old woman named Mrs. Park operated a hidden radio station. She had been born in Korea, had moved to England as a young bride, and had lived through many hard times. Now she sat in her basement, sending coded messages to anyone who would listen. The enemy is strong, but we are stronger. She broadcast into the darkness. They have ships and weapons. We have each other. Keep fighting. Keep hoping. Help is coming. She did not know if help was really coming, but she knew that hope was a weapon too. On the Valoran flagship, High Commander Torek was growing impatient. 3 days of bombardment, and still no surrender. The humans were hiding underground like insects. They were refusing to give up. This is taking too long, he complained to Kira. The Emperor expects results. We cannot spend months burning every hole in the ground. Perhaps we should land ground forces, Kira suggested. We can hunt them in their tunnels. Torek considered this. Ground warfare was messy. It was slow. It cost lives. But it might be necessary. Prepare 3 landing groups, he ordered. 100 ships each. We will land in 3 locations. The eastern coast of the main northern continent, the large island nation in the Western Ocean, and the southern tip of the African continent. We will establish bases and begin ground operations. The landing forces began their descent. 300 ships, carrying thousands of Valoran soldiers. They were confident. They were powerful. They were ready to crush any resistance. They had no idea what was waiting for them. In Japan, fishermen who had lived on the coast for generations watched the alien ships approach. These were simple men and women who caught fish and fixed nets and knew the sea better than anyone. Now they had a different job. Hidden among the fishing boats were small submarines. Not military submarines, but civilian craft that had been modified in secret. They carried missiles. They carried brave people who knew they would probably not survive. Captain Anne Yuri coordinated from her position behind the moon. Her fleet had been reinforced by civilian spacecraft, mining vessels, cargo ships, even a tourist shuttle that had been caught in space when the invasion began. None of them were warships. All of them were weapons now. Wait until they reach low altitude, she ordered. Then hit them from all sides. The trap was set. The Valoran landing ships came down through the clouds over Japan. They expected no resistance. They found hell. Missiles rose from the ocean. Drones swarmed from hidden caves in the mountains. Fighter jets that were supposed to have been destroyed screamed out of secret hangars. The sky became a battlefield. The Valarans had shields and powerful weapons. But they were landing, which meant they were slow and vulnerable. Human pilots, knowing they would die, flew directly into enemy ships. They sacrificed themselves to create openings for others. Young men and women who had never fought. Before pressed buttons that launched missiles. They watched their friends die. They kept fighting. In the first landing zone, The Valorans lost 60 ships before they could establish a base. In the second, they lost 40. In the third, they were driven back completely. Tarek could not believe the reports. More ships lost. More soldiers dead. These primitive creatures were refusing to die properly. How is this possible? He roared. They have no fleet. They have no technology. How are they hurting us? No one had an answer. In Antarctica, Yoon completed the first test of the gravitational weapon. It was a small test, using only 1% of the device's power. But it worked. A small pocket of space collapsed on itself, creating a miniature black hole that lasted for 3 seconds before disappearing. Hana watched the data and felt hope for the first time in days. It works, she told General Sunho over the secure channel. The weapon works, but we need the enemy fleet to gather in one location. If they are spread across orbit, the pulse will not catch enough of them. Sunho understood. They needed bait. They needed something that would make the Valorans concentrate their forces in one place. I have an idea, he said. But you will not like it. He was right. Hana did not like the idea at all. The plan was simple and terrible. General Sunho would broadcast a fake surrender message. He would invite High Commander Torek to a specific location to receive Earth's formal submission. The Valorans would gather their fleet for the ceremony, wanting to witness the moment of victory. And then Hana would fire the weapon. It is a trap, Sunho explained. But it requires the enemy to believe we have truly given up. They must come in large numbers. They must feel safe. And if they do not believe us, Hana asked, then we die and humanity falls. There was no other option. They had fought well, but they could not win a long war. Every day, more people died. Every day, the Valorans learned more about human tactics. Eventually, Earth would fall, unless they took this one desperate chance. Colonel Dohan prepared the broadcast. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He had to sound defeated. He had to sound broken. He had to make the enemy believe that humanity had finally given up. This is Colonel Kim Dohan of the United Earth Defense Coalition, he said into the microphone. His voice was heavy with fake despair. We are prepared to discuss terms of surrender. Our resistance has ended. We invite High Commander Torek to bring his fleet to the following coordinates for formal negotiations. He transmitted the location, a point directly above the South Pacific, far from any major city. The perfect killing ground. On the Valoran flagship, Torek received the message. He smiled with satisfaction. Finally, he said, they have come to their senses. Commander, Kira said carefully, it could be a trap. Of course, it could be a trap, Tarek replied. But what can they possibly do? We have 9,000 ships. They have nothing. Even if they have some hidden weapons, they cannot destroy us all. He was right, in a way. The humans could not destroy 9,000 ships. But they only needed to destroy most of them. Order the fleet to consolidate, Torek commanded. All ships will gather at the surrender point. I want the humans to see our full power before they kneel. Kira hesitated. Every military instinct told her this was wrong. But Torek was the commander, and his orders were law. Yes, Commander, she said. Across Earth orbit, 9,000 Valoran ships began to move. They gathered together, forming a massive cloud of metal and power above the South Pacific. It was the largest gathering of warships in the history of the galaxy. And below, in a frozen cave at the bottom of the world, Yoon Hana watched them come. Get ready, she whispered to her team. It is almost time. Her finger hovered over the activation switch. The fate of Earth rested on a single button. The Valoran fleet gathered like a storm cloud over the South Pacific. 9,000 ships hung in space, blocking the stars, casting shadows on the ocean below. It was a display of power meant to terrify. It was meant to show humanity how small and helpless they truly were. High Commander Torek stood on his bridge and looked at the blue planet below. He had spent 200 years conquering worlds. He had crushed civilizations that were far more advanced than these humans. He had never failed. Today, he would add another victory to his name. All ships in position, Kira reported. The humans have sent a shuttle from the surface. It is approaching now. Torek nodded. The surrender would be formal. The humans would kneel before him, and he would accept their submission with grace. Then the colonization would begin. The mines would be dug. The factories would be built. Earth would become another jewel in the Valoran crown. But deep beneath the Antarctic ice, something else was happening. Yunhata stood before the gravitational weapon. It was massive, filling a cavern that had taken months to carve from the frozen rock. Thousands of cables connected to generators that hummed with power. Scientists and engineers stood at their stations, checking readings, making final adjustments. Hana's assistant, Seo Junho, looked at the display screen. 92% of the enemy fleet is within the target zone, he said. The remaining 8% are too far away. That is enough, Hana replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. If this works, we will destroy most of their fleet. The survivors will not be enough to conquer us. And if it does not work? Hana did not answer. They both knew what would happen. The energy feedback would create a cascade failure. The entire facility would be vaporized. The Antarctic ice would crack and melt. A tidal wave would wash over the southern oceans. But that did not matter now. Earth was dying anyway. Millions were already dead. Cities were burning. Children were crying in dark shelters, asking when they could go home. This was their only chance. General Sunho's voice came through the radio. He was in a bunker somewhere in Korea, watching the same data Hana was watching. Dr. Yoon, he said, the shuttle has almost reached the enemy flagship. We have about 10 minutes before they realize we are not actually surrendering. Understood, Hana said. Beginning power sequence now. The machine began to hum louder. Lights flickered. The temperature in the cavern dropped as energy was pulled from the air itself. The scientists checked their instruments and exchanged nervous glances. In orbit, Torek watched the human shuttle approach. It was a small craft, barely large enough for 3 people. So weak, so fragile. So typical of these primitive creatures. Open a communication channel, he ordered. I want to hear their groveling. But no groveling came. Instead, a voice spoke clearly and without fear. High Commander Torek, the voice said. It belonged to Captain An Yuri. She had volunteered to fly the shuttle herself. She had known she would probably die. She had come anyway. I bring a message from Earth. Speak, Torek said. I am listening. We do not surrender, Yuri said. We never did. We never will. Torek's smile faded. What? Look below you, Commander. Look at that small blue world. It is our home, our only home. We were born there, and we will die there. But we will not kneel. An alarm began to sound on the Valoran bridge. Kira's eyes went wide as she read the data on her screen. Commander, we are detecting an energy buildup on the planet's surface. Massive readings. Location, the southern ice continent. What kind of energy? Torek demanded. Unknown. It is unlike anything in our records. It is bending space itself. Torek felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear. All ships, disperse. He shouted. Full retreat now. But it was too late. In Antarctica. Hana pressed the button. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself screamed. The gravitational pulse expanded outward at nearly the speed of light. It was invisible to the eye, but its effects were devastating. The fabric of reality twisted and tore. Gravity changed direction randomly. Time moved differently in different places. The Valoran ships were caught in the maelstrom. Metal warped and bent in ways that should not have been possible. Engines exploded as fuel lines stretched to breaking point. Crew members experienced impossible sensations as gravity pulled them in multiple directions at once. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles were torn apart like paper in a hurricane. Tarek watched in horror as his fleet died around him. Ships exploded. Ships collapsed into themselves. Ships simply broke into pieces and scattered like leaves in the wind. His own flagship shuddered. Alarms screamed. The lights flickered and went dark, then came back dimly. Damage report. He shouted. Hull breaches on 17 decks, Kira yelled back. Engines offline. Shields failing. We are losing atmosphere. Can we retreat? Navigation is destroyed. We are blind. Torek looked out the viewport. The sky was filled with debris. Thousands of ships were dead. His entire fleet, the pride of the Valoran Empire, was being torn apart by a weapon he did not understand. And below, on that small blue planet, he knew that the humans were watching. They were seeing their victory. They were cheering and crying and hugging each other. They were celebrating the death of his dream. Somehow, impossibly, they had won. When the pulse finally ended, the silence was overwhelming. Where 9,500 ships had been, only scattered debris remained. The Valoran fleet was gone. 17 ships survived. 17 out of almost 10,000. They limped away from Earth, their engines barely working, their crews in shock. Torek was among them. His flagship had held together, just enough to escape the worst of the pulse. He did not speak as his crippled ship fled toward deep space. He did not give orders. He just stared at the blue planet growing smaller behind them. He had been defeated by primitives, by a species that had barely reached their own moon, by creatures who had turned their own atmosphere into a weapon and bent space itself to save their home. The Valoran Empire would learn of this. The Emperor would be furious. There would be calls for revenge, demands for another fleet, plans for another invasion. But Torek knew the truth. Earth was not worth the cost. Some worlds were too dangerous to conquer. Some species were too stubborn to break. Humanity was one of them. On Earth, the celebration lasted for days. In the ruins of Seoul, people danced in the streets. In the shelters of Europe, survivors hugged and cried and thanked whatever gods they believed in. In Antarctica, Hannah and her team collapsed from exhaustion, too tired to celebrate but too happy to sleep. The war was over. Earth had survived, but the leaders knew that the work was not finished. The aliens would be back someday. Maybe not the Valorans, but others. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. Park Jisu, the young officer who had first detected the invasion, was given a new mission. She would record a message, a warning to any who might threaten Earth in the future. She sat in front of a camera, wearing her uniform, looking more tired than any person should look, but her voice was strong. To all who would threaten our world, she said, "We are humanity. We are fragile and short-lived. We know we are small in this vast universe, but we protect our own. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And we have learned to bend the stars themselves against those who wish us harm. This is your only warning." The message was sent into space, traveling at the speed of light toward every corner of the galaxy. It carried footage of the Valoran fleet's destruction. It carried the faces of human soldiers and scientists and ordinary people who had refused to give up. It carried a simple truth. Earth was not an easy target. Across the galaxy, in 100 different empires, military commanders watched the footage. They analyzed it. They debated it. They feared it. And one by one, quietly, They removed Earth from their lists of potential conquests. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as subjects, but as equals. Not as the conquered, but as the unconquerable. They had sent 9,500 ships to conquer Earth. Only 17 returned, and the story of those 17 survivors spread across the stars. Warning all who heard it, do not underestimate the small blue world at the edge of the galaxy. Do not assume that their weakness is real. Do not mistake their kindness for submission. They are humanity, and they are not to be trifled with. In a quiet house in Bizen, General Lee Sunho sat in his garden and watched the sunset. The sky was red and gold and beautiful. Birds sang in the trees. Flowers bloomed around him. He had saved the world. He had led humanity through its darkest hour. Now he was retired again, happy to grow vegetables and feed the birds and pretend he was just an ordinary old man. But he kept a radio on his desk, tuned to the emergency frequency, just in case, because he knew the truth. Humanity had won this battle, but the war for survival would never truly end. There would always be new threats, new challenges, new enemies who thought Earth was weak. And humanity would always surprise them. That was what humans did best. They survived. They adapted. They fought. They won. And somewhere far across the galaxy, the survivors of the Valoran fleet told their story to anyone who would listen. They spoke of a small blue world defended by impossible weapons and unbreakable spirits. They spoke of a species that would not surrender, could not be broken, refused to die. They spoke of humanity. And the galaxy listened. And remembered. And feared.